Today we are going to learn how to model the simple truss with the clean joints in Revit. First thing we do is we go to the Structure tab and we go to the Truss option. Here in the Family option we have one truss, but if you want to use some other truss you can go to Load Family option and then you can go back to the Structural Trusses folder, where you can pretty much see many options of trusses, many families you can use. You can also create your new one, which is also very easy, and in one of the next tutorials I will also explain that. But let's use some simple truss today. I will just load this one that already existed. And once it's loaded, what you have to do is first you have to draw it horizontally. So let's say I want the 10 meters long truss with, for example, 2 meters height. I would just click where I want my truss to begin and I will draw it to be exactly the length I want it. I see now here that it's 10 meters and then I click on that spot and it's generated now. We see it here with just one line, and the reason for that is because our detail level is set to coarse and the structural framing is only visible with one line in that setting. So I will go here and I will choose fine. And once we choose fine, we can actually see the structural framing in the plan as well. I will go to 3D and we can see how it looks now. In order to change its height, we can click on it and we can select some other truss height, let's say 2 meters. And as we can see, it can raise. And if you ever want to change its length, you can also select it. And in the plan, you will simply just extend it by clicking this spot in the end and just extending it wherever you want it to be. Basically, all of these trusses will be modified in a way that they will follow these grids that the truss family has. Now that we have our truss, we will probably want to replace the framing with some other sort of framing we prefer. And to do that, we go to the Insert tab and we go to Load Family. We do this because we want to load the family of the beam we want to be using in this truss. So we go back and we find the Structural Framing folder. And then we choose which material we want. We have all of these framing folders, and for example, today I will use steel and maybe I will just use some round steel bar, but you can use any of these you want. Basically, the process is pretty much the same for all of these. So I will choose round bar and I will click open. I get the window with the families I can open and I will just select some random one. It doesn't matter because I will be creating my custom framing anyway. So I click OK. And now I will first go to Structure and the Beam option, just so I can create the new set of families I will be using in this truss. And I will go to Edit Type and I will duplicate the existing one. And let's say, for example, for the border framing, I want to be using, for example, 20 centimeters diameter bar. I will just duplicate and I will name it 20 centimeters, click OK. And then I will input the diameter of 20 centimeters, for example. I click OK and now I have created that family. Then I will go again to Edit Type and I will click Duplicate again. And let's say my inner beams will be 15 centimeters, for example, so I will create that family as well. I click on OK and I insert 15 in the diameter of this beam. I click OK once again. And now I can apply this beam to my truss. I click on this truss and I go to Edit Type. And once I open Edit Type window, I can see that I have few options. I have top chords, vertical webs, diagonal webs, and bottom chords. These are the options of each different framing types. And let's say for top and bottom, I want to be using the 20 centimeters one. So I go to the structural framing tab of the top chords and I choose the newly created 20 centimeters one. The same I do for bottom chords. And for vertical and diagonal webs, I will choose the 15 centimeters one. Once I have done that, I click OK. And as you can see, our truss is now looking a lot different. It has different kinds of beam in it. What is important to know is while this truss is a system of beams, we can still treat each of these beams independently. What I mean by that is while all of the main setting of the truss is controlled by us clicking on the truss, the entire truss, and going to edit type, we can also select each of these beams independently and make modifications. For example, let's say I want all of my boundary trusses to be 20 centimeters. I can see that these two vertical ones on the beginning and the end are 15. That's because obviously they do fall on the vertical truss categories and I want only them to be different than the rest of these vertical trusses. To modify only single beam, I can click on tab and then I can select only one beam. I have to unpin it first, click this pin symbol here, and then I can simply choose another family. I can choose 20 centimeters one, and I can do the same for this end boundary beam. I click tab, I select it, I unpin it, and I simply change the family. Essentially, we have now set up all of our beams, we have set up their types, but what we also have to do is obviously clean these joints. They look very bad by default. We can see none of them are joined well. To do that, I will create section and I will do everything from the section view. I will open L1 plan and then I will create a section and I will go to that section. And just like with the plan, in order to see everything in a good detail, I first have to change my detail level to fine. So let's first create a join of this first vertical beam and this bottom beam. In order to do that, what I first have to do is I have to extend them a little and I will use these triangular grabs and I will extend these beams a little bit. To extend them, we also have to unpin them and I select the bottom one, I unpin it, and I will also extend it a little bit. It doesn't matter how much, we will be cutting it anyway. To cut it, we will be using reference plane tool to help us. We click on reference plane and we create the diagonal plane. I will just extend that one as well. And once we have created this plane, we can now go to the modify cut option. And then we click on one beam and then we click on a plane. And as you can see, this beam will be cut perfectly to a plane. The same we do with this other beam. And we first click beam and then we click plane. Now we can see that this cut looks perfect. We have a clean meter join in the boundaries. We do the same for the rest of these boundary beams. I go back to section and I extend these beams. I unpin it if I have to. I go to reference plane. I start from the middle and create the diagonal plane, which I extend later. Then I go to modify, cut, and do the same process. I will just fast forward to the rest of these boundary beams. Now we have handled all of our boundary cuts, and now we have to treat these diagonal and vertical beams. They are handled with a different tool. We don't use cut tool anymore, but now we will be using the coping tool. First thing we do is, just like before, we first unpin this beam and then we extend it just so it enters these two beams. Now we can apply coping by going to the cope tool, and first we click on our diagonal beam and then we click on one beam, and then we click again to the diagonal beam and then we click other beam. This way we have coped our diagonal beam to both of these other beams. But of course we see that we have some strange gap between them, and the reason for that is because once we select this beam, we can go to this structural tab in the properties and we have coping distance option. It essentially creates this gap between the coped elements, and we don't want that in this case, so we simply click 0 here. And now we have no more coping distance. And our joints look clean. Basically now we use coping for all of these other elements. First we simply extend them, and once they are extended we just use coping. First you select the element you want to cope, and then you select the element you want to cope to. You do that once again for this other beam, and you also enter 0 in the coping distance option. So we have coped these two beams to the bottom beam. We also have to cope them to one another, so we go to cope option, we click on one beam and then we click on other beam, and now these two beams are coped to each other. I will do the same for the rest of these beams. I will fast forward it so you don't rewatch this process again. Essentially, I will be doing pretty much the same to everything. I will first cope this beam to the upper beam, then this beam to the upper beam, and then these two beams to each other. And in the end, I will also remove the coping distance. Now we have this middle one, and this one actually has 3 beams going into these lower bottom beams. The process is pretty much the same. We first click one, then the bottom, then second, then the bottom, then third, then the bottom, and we simply apply then the coping distance of 0. It's pretty much the same, we just have one additional step. I have finished everything, and this is what my truss looks like now. It is very clean, it looks good, and basically this way you can clean any truss you are using with any sorts of beam types. The problem with this process though, it is obviously a little bit lengthy, it did take some time. You can do some things to save time. For example, you don't have to unpin each of these beams separately like I did. You can just select many of them and then just unpin it. And you can also, for example, apply the coping distance of 0 to all the beams at the same time. You don't have to do that separately for each beam. That would save you some time, but essentially if you have a very large truss you will still have a lot of work to do to completely clean it up. But the good part is that once you do this for just one truss, you don't have to be redoing it again for each truss. In order to avoid doing this for each truss by hand, you can group this truss before copying it. I will go back to section and I will select all of my elements and group them. What I have to note, what is extremely important, is that you have to also include all of the reference planes in the group. If you create group without reference planes, once you copy this truss, it will lose the cuts. You would have to create the cuts with new planes. They would simply copy in their original state. Without this clean cut, they would simply be two beams that are not joined. So if you want to retain these clean cuts, you have to not forget to include these reference planes in the group. So I have selected everything. I have selected truss, I have selected all of the beams, and I have also selected the reference planes. And now I can go to create group tool, and I will simply call it truss or something like that and click OK. Now I have this group. I can just go ahead and copy it in the way that they will exist in my project, let's say 2 meters or whatever. And now when I go to 3D, I see that I have 3 of these perfectly clean trusses. Once you modify one, all of them will also have that modifications. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy learning with us, take a look at our architectural course through the link below. With 20 hours of structured video lessons, it's designed to help beginners master Revit step by step. To support your progress, we've included assignments with each lesson, plus the opportunity to ask questions and receive guidance directly from the instructor whenever you need it. This way, you're not just watching tutorials, you're actively learning, practicing, and improving with guidance every step of the way. Thank you for watching.